23,
What?
correct? Yeah, that's the first name. Yeah.
Okay, of the Gospel of Matthew, chapter
Yes.
23? All right,
He
I need to
probably,
see that
yeah,
book. So you study behavioral science and why people do things.
yeah.
Do you think he did it for the money or because he found the classes so convincing that Christianity was true?
Christianity and Judaism. He thought it was two neighbors and they were
Mm,
friendly conversations, and it's probably how he was brought up
I see.
in a family with having one Christian child brought up Jewish and a Jewish family in a Jewish family.
Shalom and welcome to Hebrew Voices. I'm here today with Mascha Van Dort. She is a master's of applied physics from the Technical University of Delft. She's worked as a researcher for the last 25 years in behavioral sciences. And Professor Meir Bar-Ilan of Bar-Ilan University recommended her research on the authorship of the Cochin Hebrew Gospels. He recommended that to me when I interviewed him. And we're going to talk today about her. She has a really important article that's come out, and you could agree with it or disagree with it, but it's in one of the top journals in the world on Jewish studies, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, the Revue des Etudes Juifs. This is a journal that is, it's interesting, in Jewish sources, they refer to this in Hebrew as the French journal, and then biblical, Jewish Quarterly Review, they refer to as the English journal. Right, like in the 19th century, there were two major journals in Jewish study, and then there was the German journal, Tzedeve. So this is a major thing that goes back, this journal, over 150 years, and for her to have an article in that journal is really an historic thing. So this is something, guys, you have to pay attention to, even if you disagree with it. It is, I'm showing it here on the screen. Her article is called Commissioner Purpose Translators, Copyists and Age of the Hebrew New Testament of Cochin, that's in India, and the Quran of the Library of Congress. And I heard about this. I'm like, okay, this is absolutely fascinating. We have to have this on the program. This is a Hebrew Voices story. So we have this full, complete New Testament in Hebrew that was brought to Cambridge University by this Buchanan fellow. I've been to Cambridge. I've held this in my hands, and now we have a woman who's discovered, according to her article in it's called REJ, Revue des Etudes Juifs, explaining where it comes from. So before we get into it, you're in applied physics and behavioral sciences. How did you get into studying a Hebrew New Testament from India?
Well, yeah. Okay, so how it goes really. So my name is Mascha Van Dort, and I have the same last name as one of the translators of the Hebrew New Testament. And actually, what motivates me in my research is that I really am curious about what motivates people. And I do that for innovations, and there's the relation to applied physics, what I'm doing today. But I'm also really curious to what drives people through time and also through cultures. So it was sort of a personal interest that I followed, but it's just in line with what I do. Yeah.
So is he your ancestor, this Van
No,
Dort who translated the Gospels
no,
or
he's
the New
not.
Testament? He's
No,
not. Okay.
no.
Is it a coincidence?
No, it's not a coincidence. We share the same last name. So what happens? What happened in the Netherlands? A lot of people have a surname starting with Van, which means from, and then you have a city name. So you could be named from Delft. You came from Delft, the city, and I'm from Dort, and which refers to the city of Dordrecht.
So like the painter, we say in English Van Gogh, but I think you say Van Gogh. So he was from a town called Gogh?
Yeah, probably. Although Gogh is a city in Germany and not in Holland, but yeah, probably. So his
Okay.
ancestors probably came from that
So
city.
as a behavioral scientist, why did he cut off his ear? You don't have to answer that. It's fine.
Yeah, well, that's a long story.
Let's save that for a different discussion. All right.
Yeah,
So Van Dort, you're someone with Leopold Emanuel Jacob Van Dort,
yeah,
according to your hypothesis here, translated the New Testament or parts of
yeah.
it into Hebrew, and he happens to have the same name as you. But you had told me that somebody contacted you to find out if he was your relative. Is that what got you interested?
Yeah, Well, no, actually, my father, he retired, and a lot of
Hmm.
retirees, or how do you call it? They do like ancestry research.
Oh, okay.
And so basically in the Netherlands there are four to five families that have the surname Van Dort, and I'm from one of
Okay.
them. And so what I did is I was in innovation management, technical. I made a nice, beautiful website for him. So back in before 2000, say. And
Oh,
what happened is that I got a phone call around 2000, um, actually from Professor Barilan, and he asked me, "Do I know more about Leopold Emanuel Jacob van Dort?" And back in that time, I didn't know, but I searched something, and well, something came popping up. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, there was a book coming out about him, and so it's called My Interest Again, and it was actually just before COVID. And I started going into it, and I contacted Professor Mai Barilan again, and also another professor from Copenhagen, that is Hanna Trautner Kroman. And so it got rolling. Again, I found quite a lot of, well, actually 300 pages of information, and really a lot of new sources. Because before that,
you also have a book coming out.
yeah, I have,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
All right.
yes.
Wonderful. So we're going to put up a link to that when it comes out, but right now we'll have a link to the article.
Yeah.
Okay. And you told me that they're going to make the article open access at some point, but right now it looks like you have to pay for it. So,
Mhm.
but hopefully soon it'll be open access and everyone can read it. All right. So tell us about this. So you looked into this Leopold. He has a long name.
Yeah.
Leopold Emanuel Jacob. I'll just call him Leopold. Leopold von Dort. And you found out he wasn't your relative, but he has an interesting story.
Yeah.
So who is he, and how did he
Yeah.
come to translate the New Testament or parts of the New Testament into Hebrew?
Yeah. He was the grandson of the first Jewish person who came to Dordrecht. So that's a city in Holland. And his grandfather came from Poland. And of course, we knew there were just about six records of Van Dort when I started out. We knew that he was Jewish, but that he had converted. So it was really a puzzle to find out how he linked.
He converted to Christianity, you mean?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
And it was really a puzzle to find out where he came from, where he was born. But he was actually born in 1712 in The Hague, and he was the son of a Melamed. And
What?
a Melamed.
Oh, a Melamed. Okay, a
A
teacher.
Melamed. Very good.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he trained as a Chazan, and first he worked in Dordrecht, so in his ancestral city. The Hague is actually was kind of a big place back then. It was the city of our court, so the
Hmm.
Prince of Orange, and also the court, because we had a sort of well, it was. I wouldn't say it was a democracy, but it was more than a prince reigning court. We had like a republic actually at that time.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
And by the way, it's interesting. You said his grandfather came from Poland, and obviously Van Dort is not a Polish name,
oh,
but
uh,
Jews in Poland didn't have names at the time.
no,
Or
he
they
had a
didn't have
name.
surnames. They didn't take the family names until they were forced to by the Russian Empire.
Hmm.
The reason they gave them surnames, like my name Gordon,
Yeah,
that was something only that came about like in maybe the 1800s, and that
yeah,
was because they wanted to tax them. And
uh-huh,
if I said I'm Nehemia ben Ruvain, well, there's 12 of those. How do we know which one you are? So to tax you, we need to give you a family name.
yeah.
So when he came to it's interesting. He's called Van Dort, but in Poland he didn't have a name, or a surname rather. So he
No,
only got it when he.
he was Salomon Levi,
Oh,
and
okay.
he
So Levi means he's a Levite. So
yeah.
that's not really a surname, but I mean, became one, later. Yeah.
Well, Levi is for a son of Judah, really, in the Netherlands, so that's how it
Well,
works.
Levi means he's from the tribe of Levi. So,
I wouldn't say that. He's a
oh,
son of
okay.
Judah. Yeah.
No, Judah was maybe his father's name.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, But all
Yeah,
right.
I wouldn't be I wouldn't be sure. Anyway,
Okay.
Leopold's name was, he was Jacob Moses van Dort, and he was a son of Moses van Dort,
Okay.
and Martha Cohen. So he was a son of a Cohen.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, Marta is so Martha is who? Leopold's mother.
yeah, it was his mother.
Okay,
Mhm.
so his mother's father was a Kohen, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's move
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Right. Okay, where were we?
So
Yeah.
we're talking about so Leopold converted to Christianity. How did that
Yeah.
happen? His
Well, he
father
was
was a teacher. How does he end up converting to Christianity?
no, he was a well. He worked for 6 years as a Chazan in Dordrecht,
Oh, so
and then
Chazan is a cantor. So he's the cantor in the synagogue. Okay.
yeah, he was a cantor and probably was conducting most of the services because the rabbi was like a prestigious rabbi. He was already kind of old. So, and by the way, it was his. He was also related to the rabbi. So there were two
Okay.
important families in Dordrecht. And well, he was one of them, and Rabbi was the other. What happened in 1741, it was a really cold year, and I mean really cold year. So the average temperature in Celsius, it was below 12 degrees over the whole year, which is very cold for the
This
Netherlands.
is
So yeah,
1741. You're saying
right? Yeah, it was like
1741.
yeah. And he was a Hassan, and he was probably also living by teaching. So
You said it was minus 21.
no, it was
So
not minus 21.
it was. What was the temperature? I didn't hear. All right, in
It was
Celsius.
average below 12 degrees.
Oh, 12,
Yeah,
below 12 Celsius.
yeah,
Oh,
Celsius.
but not minus. Oh, so that's not cold.
Yeah,
It was
it was really it was a disastrous year, and
it was
it was
minus
really cold.
12 or 12. Sorry.
Yeah, but it did the temperature didn't come be above 12 in the summer, and normally we have
Oh,
temperatures until 28. So
okay.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
I see. So
cold.
12
Yeah,
Celsius is 53.6 Fahrenheit.
yeah,
And you're saying normally it gets up to 82. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So
I'm from Chicago originally, so that doesn't seem so horrible to me. But all right, anyway, go
it
ahead.
was not horrible. Well, for the Netherlands, it's horrible. It is kind of horrible.
It's bad for the crops and all those tulips and all that, probably.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about the tulips in that time, but it definitely was not good for the crops. And also,
Okay.
a lot of floods were happening. So,
Oh,
and because he probably depended on private teaching as well for his income, so he was forced to leave. And he taught for another 4 years in the east, so more in Germany and the east of the Netherlands. Um, and he was married in 1734, and she probably went with him. But in 1745, he had a younger brother, and that was a foster brother. And the interesting thing about this brother is that this foster brother was born as a Christian son. He was an illegitimate son of a noble family, and he grew up with him. And his younger brother, and he was called Bear or Benjamin, he turned 25, which is the age of adulthood, and he was entitled to an income by his illegitimate father.
so
So
his brother
yeah,
had a Christian father. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
and a Christian mother, both. Yeah.
Oh, and wait. So how is it his brother? I'm confused.
Oh, it was a foster brother.
Oh, okay, okay, all right,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
So Bear is his adopted brother or foster brother
yeah.
that
Hmm.
grows up with Leopold. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know it sounds like an incredible fairy tale story, but it's actually the truth. I have
Well,
it from
the
four or
world's
five
complicated,
friends.
right? So,
Yeah, and actually, I it took me about 4 years to believe it myself, but yeah.
right.
So he was a son of two noble of a count and a duchess actually. And because of the difference in a noble rank, they couldn't marry. Um, and
Oh,
yes,
so
and
they gave their son to be raised
yeah,
by a Jewish family?
yeah, they did.
Okay. Wow. All
Yeah,
right.
in The Hague, where the sister of the count was living in The Hague. The baby went with his sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does this lead Leopold to convert to Christianity, I suppose, is now the
Well,
question.
what Beer was entitled to a yearly income, and to claim this income, and probably Leopold was the oldest of the younger siblings. He went with him, and to be entitled, his father probably said you have to reconvert to Christianity. So they took classes in Aix-la-Chapelle, Aachen, that's on the border of the Netherlands in Germany, and Beer returned to Christianity, and Leopold converted with him to Christianity.
Oh.
Yes.
So, all right. So you study behavioral science and why people do things.
Yeah.
Do you think he did it for the money, or because he found the classes so convincing that Christianity was true?
Well, he wrote about it and about converting.
So we know why. All right.
Yeah.
If we believe him, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, those are conversion stories, and they back then they always had like a drama and then a happy ending, much like these conversion stories. The ones, well, the action movies we have now. So there are a couple, of course. It's not always that there's a happy ending after conversion. But well, I think there were two drivers. First of all, the after 74, those 4 years, those were hard years on everyone. And he probably did a lot of private teaching, and private teaching were depending on the salaries of the parents. And there's actually a note going out. There was a note going out from Amsterdam, from the central Jewish, well, actually from the rabbis. Please, teachers, please, parents, pay your teachers, because teachers were notoriously underpaid. So I think that's one of the drivers. And well, I think it was also kind of a family duty to help the younger son. So I think those are the two main drivers. And what you see in his later writings is that he was actually he really stuck to Christianity. He also was married to Christian, and he had a daughter. So reconverting would have made his daughter illegit, which he did not want.
We're talking about Leopold had a daughter.
Yeah, he later had a Christian daughter.
So
Yeah, he married again.
A Christian daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I don't understand. His wife was Christian.
You marry again, and then you marry Christian, and then you have a
so that's his second wife. Okay.
Yeah, I had a second wife. My suspicion is I couldn't find it that his first wife died. So yeah.
Okay. So he wrote a book. What's the name? So what's this book called? He wrote
three books, and the first
3 books.
The first book is called well, actually, an explanation of Matthew 23, I think. 23.
What?
Correct? Yeah, that's the first name. Yeah.
Okay, of the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23.
Yes.
All right, I need to see that book.
Yeah, it was of course in German, and he had to write that because that was an obligatory thing to do for your conversion. You needed to write something, and
really. He had to write an essay in order to convert to Christianity.
Yeah, there was a whole cycle if you wanted to convert to the Roman Catholic Church. Actually,
so it was Catholic. Okay.
Yeah, the Protestant Church was a bit more loose in which you had.
I thought. So correct me if I'm. I thought in Holland or the Netherlands, don't they have a? It's not a Protestant country. Are there also Catholics?
Protestant, and Germany is half Protestant, half German.
Oh, so this was in Germany that this Duke or whatever was. Okay.
Yeah, and also it's good context to know that half German was Protestant, and because people converted from Catholicism to Protestantism quite sometimes and different. So it was not something unusual, really. From Judaism to Christianity is of course something else, but it was not infrequent. His second book, and that is really nice to know because that was his most important book. And it's called The Book of Dawn, and it was a reaction to another. It's quite well known mission book to Jews, and that was called light in the evening, so light of dusk. And he wrote a book, and it's called A Book of Dawn, and it describes a friendly conversation between two neighbors, one a rabbi and one a converted person, and that's really what he thought about the two religions. So about Christianity and Judaism, he thought it was two neighbors, and they were friendly conversations, and it's probably how he was brought up in a family with having one Christian child brought up Jewish and a Jewish family in a Jewish family. So yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So am I understanding that he wasn't hostile towards Judaism or Christianity? Is that, would you say that's okay? That's really interesting.
He was brought up with both, I guess. And for him, it wasn't too far, and it wasn't unnatural. I mean, if you brought up with it from a young when you're young, it's quite yeah. I think it's more fluid.
It's interesting. So, I mean, even today in the 21st century, most Christians know almost nothing about Judaism, and most Jews, frankly, know almost nothing about Christianity. I had some friends in Israel who were Christians, and they were very devout, I would say, like evangelical Christians. And they were speaking to this, they like rented an apartment in Israel, and they were speaking to the landlord. And they said, "You know what we believe?" And they're like, "Yeah, Katolim, you're Catholics." And they're like, "No." Like in their mind, Catholics aren't even Christians, right? Because from where they come from, American evangelicals. So the average Jew knows almost nothing about Christianity, and the average Christian, knows relatively little about Judaism. Even in our age today, it blows my mind. Like you'll see these anti-Semitic rants online where they're saying, the Talmud says X, Y, Z. Yeah, but most Jews have never read the Talmud, and the Talmud says all kinds of things. There are discussions and debates in it, right? So that's somebody's opinion you're quoting, and most Jews have never heard that opinion, and if they heard it, they'd be horrified too. So I mean, so it's very interesting. So he had exposure to both because he has a Christian brother. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
A Christian brother who's being forced to reconvert back to his religion.
He wasn't forced. He wanted.
Well, if he wanted the money, he had to do it. So in a sense.
Yeah. And so they both they went on an endeavor. They wanted to establish a newspaper printing press. So newspapers in that time were very innovative, and so they had the example of the newspaper, the Gazette de Cologne from Cologne. And this newspaper, this was a German newspaper, and it was actually read in The Hague. It was a really important political influence, and they set up this endeavor to establish a newspaper, and they didn't know where yet because they wanted to establish it in the German town. They knew that there was a peace congress coming up in some German town in the area, and that was their endeavor, and they got a privilege so that they could print anything, and they were exempt from censorship from the emperor, and they got this privilege also through the father of Benjamin Orbea, so from his brother.
Okay, well that's nice to be exempt from censorship. Okay.
Yeah. That's really essential back then. Yeah.
Okay.
So
all right. So they set up a newspaper. Yeah. And what town is this in?
Well, basically 1746 in fall, and because in 1747 this peace congress was coming up in Aix-la-Chapelle, so all the king of France, the king of England, the Prince of Holland, but also Prussia, and the Emperor of Austria, of Habsburg, Austria is actually the German Empire. They all sent their ambassadors to Aix-la-Chapelle. So
Aix-la-Chapelle in English, okay.
Yeah, Aix-la-Chapelle. How do you call it in English?
I think we say Aix-la-Chapelle.
Oh, Aix-la-Chapelle. That's interesting because it's a French translation of Aachen. Well, never mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, is that Aachen?
Yes.
Aix-la-Chapelle? Oh, okay. That's the same city. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was their endeavor, and that's what they were going to do.
Okay.
So his first book he printed on his own printing press in the city center. Well, the newspaper was never a success. So in 1749 they sold the business.
Yeah.
And Leopold, well, he was already married. He had a daughter, a Christian daughter by then. And so he started tutoring noble sons. Yeah.
Okay.
As a tutoring Hebrew, and I was actually he tutored Protestant children because Catholic children they went to the Jesuit gymnasia. So there was and Protestant children they were schooled at home. And he had quite a good career going on. So he went from teaching lower noble sons to really the upper noble sons. And he did it for quite some years. And what he really aspired, Leopold, was he would like to get a position at the university. So he did job interviews with several universities. We know that. So in Leipzig, in Jena, but also in Göttingen.
Okay.
And well, his resume says that he taught at some university, but he for sure did not teach at Leipzig. He studied there. He studied philosophy, and it was actually in line. His education was in line with the Jesuit priests. So he really took the curriculum from the Jesuit priests. And in some records, he also mentions the Jesuit priests. So he was really inspired by Jesuit priests, who were the great teachers of that day. So he really wanted to be a teacher. Yeah.
Okay. So he's a Catholic. He's inspired by Jesuits.
Yeah.
So I know some of my audience will say, "Oh, he's not a Christian. He's a Catholic." But whatever. That's.
Well, you're for sure you're Christian if you're used to, if you're Catholic, but never mind.
That's an American concept. Ignore it. All right.
All right. Okay.
So all right. So all right. So how does he? So he's trying to get this university position. I don't see how he gets into India though. Oh, I guess you have the Dutch East India Company. Maybe that's something to do with
India, it. So anyway, for his application to the University of Leipzig, he already converted to Protestantism.
Oh,
and I think it's
okay.
Yeah, I think it wasn't too far anyway, and it is in line with teaching Protestant children. And he was actually teaching in the northern half of Germany, so that is Protestant.
So he converts from Judaism to Catholicism, hangs out with the Jesuits, and now he's a Protestant. Okay.
No, he didn't hang out with the Jesuits, by the way.
Well, he is inspired by the Jesuits. Okay. Yeah. What or at least educationally, right? What which denomination do we know of Protestantism? Because
which denomination?
Was it Lutheran or
no? He probably converted in Leipzig to Lutheranism, but there are no records there. I checked, but they didn't record it, unfortunately. So yeah, and so what I said, he was teaching higher noble sons, and he actually taught the sons of I think it's even the Prince of Brunswick, so in Brunswick, and there he met. I need to check that. I'm sorry. Count von.
Well, people can read the article. He met some counts. We can move past that.
Yeah. So what he met,
guys, go read the article. We're just giving you a tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more information. Yeah. This woman worked for, it sounds like, decades to produce this information.
Yeah, I know. So he met Count von Rantzau. And Count von Rantzau was working for the Dutch East India Company.
Okay.
He was related to the Prince of Brunswick. And he worked in Colombo, actually, in Ceylon. So
which today is Sri Lanka, the capital of Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, yeah. So he was one of. They had multiple provinces, and he oversaw one of the provinces in Ceylon. And he knew that there was something called the Seminary of Colombo, and that they had a position open for a Hebrew professor at the seminary of
Okay,
Colombo.
so he can't get a job in Europe, so he goes to Sri Lanka. And help me out here. At the time, the Dutch East India Company, they ruled Ceylon?
Yes, the Dutch ruled Ceylon, except for an interior bit, yes. And for quite some long.
This is before the British got there, I guess, or?
Yes, just of course before the British got there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure about Ceylon, but most of the Dutch colonies, except for Indonesia, were taken over by the English around 1795.
Well, I think Goa was that Portuguese?
No, Goa was not. Goa remained Portuguese, but the large part of the
Goa
South
remained Portuguese until the 1960s when India invaded it. I mean, it's crazy. All right. So all right. So we're in the 1740s at this point, and he's going to Ceylon.
54 it was. Yeah, we're 1754. Okay. So he got appointed by the Dutch East India a company, and he went to Ceylon, Colombo. And what the seminary did, it was not for mission. Just let me get that straight. They were part of the of how the Dutch governed Ceylon. They governed it through schools. And what the seminary did is it trained the local Tamil, but also local Dutch burgher and other the Chetties, and there were quite some nationalities or backgrounds, let me say, in Ceylon. They trained them to be schoolmasters, to be governors, and also as they prepared them for study theology in the Netherlands to become reverends.
Wow.
So the ones that were sent out to the Netherlands and the Dutch East India paid for their study, and those were children of all backgrounds. You didn't have to be a Dutch burgher to be sent out to the Netherlands. Actually, Tamil children were also sent to the Netherlands for study of reference. Yes, the only catch was they didn't have more money than to support 2 students in Holland. So to support this study theology, they needed a Hebrew professor to train them in Hebrew, and I was
Yeah, that's impressive that they're studying Hebrew in Ceylon, in Sri Lanka, in the 1750s. I mean, that blows my mind. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and what will blow your mind a bit more, that before the school reform that they did it in Latin as well. So imagine
that I kind of expect because they're Europeans, but that they're studying Hebrew. But I guess it's part of theology for them. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, but the Dutch did a school reform in 1758, and then the local language to study was Dutch. So no more Latin. We got rid of the Latin.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but that is not relevant here. What is relevant is that in the first year he didn't have a lot of pupils for Hebrew study, and his rector actually knows. So the Dutch also had trade ports in South India on the west coast. So that's present day Kerala. Back then it was called the Malabar. And we oversold, or we had most of the pepper trade. So, and that was a highly profitable business. So all the pepper trade through the Netherlands, through Europe, went through the Dutch East India Company. And this rector had been to India quite some time to fill in the position of the reverend there. And he knew that there was also a large Jewish population in the west coast of Kerala, and especially in Cochin. And the Dutch worked in Cochin with a long-standing relation. A lot of the trade went through the Jews. And there was through one Jew particularly, and that was Ezekiel Rahabi. And
so we've heard about him, guys. Go listen to the episode I did with Mayor Bar-Ilan, or 2 episodes, and we talked about this Rahabi gentleman. All right. So he's a Jewish merchant who
Yeah.
is in Cochin, and there's actually a number of Jewish community, or there were a number of Jewish communities
Mm.
in India. There were Jews who came from Baghdad a few hundred years earlier. And remember, this is the 1700s, so it's already a couple hundred years earlier. There are Jews that, according to what we say, at least, they've been there since the 2,000 years. There's also Jews who came from Yemen. That's what I talked about with
Yeah.
Mayor Bar-Ilan, that there's definitely connections with Yemen. I held in my hand remnants of a Torah scroll from,
Mm.
it says the Malabar coast, right? But it's Kerala. And it was brought by Reverend Buchanan. And it says on it there, it says, brought from the synagogue of the Black Jews. And what
Yeah.
they mean by the Black Jews is that they're Jews who are probably Yemenite, who have mixed with local Indian, maybe wives or something. And so they're
Yeah.
kind of darker skinned. And that was a Yemenite Torah scroll, right? I mean, it was written apparently in India, but it's if you showed me any expert
Mm.
a Torah scroll from India and that Torah scroll from India and one from Yemen, you couldn't tell them apart.
Yeah.
So there's definitely trade connections, and it makes sense if you're trading in the Indian Ocean, you need to have representatives in all these major ports from Hodeidah, I guess, in Yemen all the way to Kerala. So
Yeah.
and then even all the way to Kaifeng in China, right? It's part of this international Jewish trade network, so to speak.
Yeah. So what happened is, so first of all, so they didn't have a fixed rabbi. At least
Mm-hmm.
The synagogue of Ezekiel Rabbbi, they had visiting
Mm-hmm.
rabbis from Yemen. So
Yemen, yeah. Okay.
that was their first place. And most of the women, also the women they married, they also came from Yemen. Yeah. So there had been people coming and going. So merchants coming and going from Cochin through all the centuries. Um, those ports, the people who stayed there, that was not a fixed population, a Jewish population. There were people coming and going, merchants.
And I should mention here, Maimonides. I did an episode about on the Cairo Geniza, and Maimonides' brother, he died on a he
Yeah.
left from Egypt going to India, and he died on a ship. And Maimonides tells the story of that was the saddest thing that ever happened. And remember, Maimonides was a refugee from Muslim fanatics in Spain, which tried to force him to convert to Islam, and he ends up going through Morocco, eventually to Egypt. And the saddest thing in his life is that his brother died on a ship to India. And there's this letter that his brother sent him that was like, he says he used to hold it and cry over it. It's really a dramatic story. So so you have Jews going back and forth from India, certainly since the 12th century, but probably for 2,000 years.
From the 10th century onwards, and that's mostly what people.
Well, and Mayor Bar-Ilan has done research and shown that.
Yeah.
So it talks about Solomon sent ships from Eilat to Ophir, and he says that's a place in India. Which, I mean, we knew it was somewhere in the subcontinent. He says specifically in Western India.
Yeah. So the first records which are really found in India, they are from the 10th century. The first written records. So
are those the copper plates? Is that?
They're actually from the 11th century.
Oh, the 11th century. Okay. The copper plates, guys, is such an interesting story. We won't go into that, but all right. So he doesn't have a lot of work in Colombo in Sri Lanka, and they end up sending him to Kerala. All right.
Well,
somewhere around there.
Well, he says he's going on a holiday to Cochin.
Oh, this is
okay. But to be sure, they knew his rector. He knew he had hosted Ezekiel Rahabi at the seminary because they had a printing press at the seminary. And Ezekiel Rahabi was looking for ways to print the liturgy. So how do you call it?
The Siddur prayer book. Okay, the Jewish prayer book. All right.
Yes, the Siddur. And
let me give a quick background for my audience who may not know. So Jews all over the world traditionally had a very set liturgy,
Yeah.
meaning you go to a synagogue, and look, in Christianity, they have what's called high church and low church. There is no such thing as low church in Judaism. Every synagogue, whether it's Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Karaite, all of them have a very set liturgy. And so if everybody is reciting the same prayers every Sabbath, well, it's really nice to have a book printed, because if you have to write it out by hand, it's quite painstaking and expensive. So, and then each community has slight variations, sometimes major, but usually slight variations of what the liturgy is. And so you're saying he's looking for a place to print the Indian Yemenite / probably tradition.
Yeah.
And in Yemen, they never had printing presses, even in the 20th century in the Jewish community. All right. So he's looking for a printing press. How interesting. Did he get it printed in the end?
Yes, he did. Because I already told you that Leopold Emanuel Jacob was a previous owner.
Oh, that's right.
Press. Yeah.
He had experience as a printing.
Jew. So yeah.
Okay.
That is why he went to India to Cochin. And so he arrived, I think, in January 1756. And so the first thing they did is make sure that the prayer books were printed, and he did that because Leopold, he was from The Hague. He knew the community leader there. He was actually living a couple of houses away from the community leader. They probably met a lot. And he contacted them, and the community leader was actually the banker, one of the bankers of the Prince of Orange. So he was like a court factor. And through this court factor he's called Tobias Boas. So he's very known as well, but probably for this audience the first time. They managed to print the books in Amsterdam, because in Amsterdam.
Oh, they printed it in Amsterdam. Wow. Yeah. So they're printing an Indian Jewish Siddur prayer book in Amsterdam. That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So they printed it in Amsterdam, and it was sent on the next boat again to India. They did it quite fast, because there's a manuscript of the prayer books still remaining. And
where is that manuscript?
It's somewhere in Europe. I think it's in. I have it in the library. I didn't write it down.
It's fine.
The library.
We'll look it up, and I'll put up a link.
In the UK, one of the big ones. Yeah.
And who wrote that prayer book or that manuscript? Was that Rahabi?
It was written by. It was written by. It's full of Yemenite verses. Probably written by a Yemenite. It was owned by someone. The book is from 1723 or something. It was quite older. So what they added an index to it to make it available for printing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I sent the manuscript to the Netherlands, and they received prayer books back. So yeah.
Okay. So that's amazing. I think so you think well, stuff is going on in India in the 1700s. They're this isolated community, which they kind of are, but not that isolated.
Not at all. So
they're having books printed in Amsterdam. It's amazing.
Yeah, they have books printed in Amsterdam, because that was the obvious way. They probably didn't have Hebrew characters for printing, because they had printing presses. By the way, not in the Dutch part of India, but they had it in Colombo. But instead of getting the characters, it's much easier to just send it.
Right.
They had two fleets. They had a spring fleet and a winter spring fleet and an autumn fleet going back.
Now there's probably flights 3 times a day, but then there were 2 fleets a year. Okay.
Yeah, it was a fleet of 4 or 5 boats. Yeah.
Okay.
So and they went empty to the east and full back. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and they had the whole trade route as well. So the main route was to Ceylon. Well, actually South Africa, Ceylon, and then Indonesia. And they had a separate fleet going on from Sri Lanka all the way to the west coast of India, and then up to Yemen, all the way to Yemen.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's interesting you say they left empty. They didn't have any manufactured goods to sell in India or Indonesia, or
probably they took
those wooden shoes or something.
No, I don't think so. Of course, there was you can find it not wood but iron and stuff like that. That they
Okay.
put that, yeah. And so there were some trades going towards the east.
Okay.
Yeah, but
All right.
most of
They
it
came
went
probably
out.
with muskets and swords and stuff, probably.
Yeah.
All right.
That was a huge advantage if you had them. No.
All right.
But let me get back to that later. So
Yeah.
what he did, he was there for. He was actually there to print books, but Ezekiel Rabi already started in 1741, and that is 15 years early. He
Wait, now we're getting to the Hebrew New Testament. All right, guys, pay attention. This is the exciting part.
And I want to finish off with a quote by Leopold van Dort, and actually he really wrote that, and he's a teacher. And he says to all who study, make all who are studious to learn, receive, bless, and praise from the Holy Word.
Amen.
Yes.
Who could disagree with that? Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this. This has been a pleasure. Okay. And I'm really excited about learning more about this. This is absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.